Chapter 2 before I get to my passages. I was a little bit reserved about some things I was going to say before Brent brought up some of those things the other night, and I was reserved about some things I was going to say before Brother Carlson just brought up some things. So I'm glad I feel that liberty. Judges, you know, when you're somewhere else, you got to be mindful, I think, anyways, in someone else's pulpit. But Judges chapter 2, verse 19. And it came to pass when the judge was dead that they returned and corrupted themselves more than their fathers. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word today. Lord, that's scary. That's downright frightening what we just read. And Lord, I just pray that the way you're putting this thing all together, that you'd scare doing right into us. Lord, if it happened to this man, where are we going? Help to use your word to do its perfect work and have free course in each and every heart. And Lord, if there's anyone that's just dabbling, may this session this morning be another roadblock to count the cost, not just to serve you, but to sin against you. As I'll be dealing with the cost of sin. And we'll thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. How do you go from me and Brother Carlson preaching on worship and fellowship, and the man that had a grip on God 15 hours ago, to where we are this morning? That's right. And I don't mean to minimize sin, but you know how you go from one extreme to another in a moment? Sin happens. That's right. And not to minimize sin or not to excuse sin, but although I think sin may disappoint God, I don't think sin ever surprises God. And we as ministers need to get some of that, where we come to the place that although sin in someone else may disappoint us, it doesn't shock us enough to knock us off the track with discouragement of how bad everybody's getting. Have all sinned and come short of the glory of God? Even David? Even us? Even saints? Yes. Is there any good thing in the flesh? No. Do we put confidence in any of the flesh? No. Any of the saints' flesh? No. Then why are we so shocked? I'm not excusing it. Why are we so shocked when somebody sins? When somebody does what we know the flesh is bent on doing? And here's why I say this. Because half of my frustration in ministry is, I can't believe what people are doing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Did you hear what Pastor so-and-so did? I can't believe it. Why can't you believe it? David did it. And much more than most of the pastors we know.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. Yes, sir.
But that guy was preaching so good. Preaching's got nothing to do with this.
Yeah, that's right.
Preaching is a gift. You can exercise your gift when you're as backslidden as a devil. Spirituality fluctuates. That's how. I'm not excusing it. But I'm saying when we put idyllic expectations on anybody but God, we set ourselves up for premeditated disappointment, bitterness, and shock. And that's not good, lest we get the Elijah syndrome. Man, am I the only one left?
Right. That's right.
You want peace in leadership? Judge everybody else realistically and judge yourself idealistically. We do the opposite. I can't believe that guy did that. But when we do it, I'm only human. I'm just flesh. I'm a sinner saved by grace. How about, you know what? That guy did that. Hey, he's just a sinner saved by grace. My problem is, why did I do it? Judge yourself idealistically and everybody else realistically, and you may maintain your sanity a little better. And I realize this is an extreme illustration, but did you hear Brother George killed his wife? No, I didn't hear. What did he do? He beat her to death with a frying pan. Oh, pass the salt, please. Why am I shocked that Fred killed his wife? He was a saved man. David killed another man's husband. David was for authority. David was for loyalty. David wasn't for the authority in that man's home. I'm just, well, preacher, why are you saying this? Are you downplaying sin? No, I'm trying to help us keep our sanity. Mighty men around us falling, courage almost gone. It's going to happen. Keep your eyes on Jesus, because you're not going to read about him doing this.
Amen. Amen.
Our job with dealing with other people's sins is to, number one, help eradicate the punishment of it by giving sinners the gospel. And then we that are in these positions and trying to help people is to try to limit somewhat of the temporary price for sin as we counsel and help people to grow. But we better understand sin happens. Don't let it shock you enough to knock you out of the game.
Amen.
Lots of people are going to suffer from David's sin. You say, I want to know him and the fellowship of his sufferings. You know what Christ suffered for? Other people's sins. Deal with the sin. Pray about the sin. But don't get knocked out with the shock of sin that, man, even the king fell. I'm quitting. The cost of sin. Number one, you've heard this if you've been around. Maybe you young people haven't. We do good to repeat things for our young people because we take for granted they've heard it all. Sin takes you further than you want to go and keeps you longer than you want to stay. Do you think for that 5 words in that verse that was powerful? Powerful. You think he ever, as he was enjoying the pleasure of that sin for those 5 words, do you think he ever dreamed how it would end up? Young people, sin takes you further than you want to go and keeps you longer than you want to stay. I think we do our kids a disservice sometimes. We tell them, you go out there in that world, you're going to die. Because the wages of sin is death. And they get out there, and they get high, or they get drunk, or they roll around in the back seat, and they say, I ain't dead. That was kind of fun. Listen, the devil ain't going to kill you the first time. Lust, when it is conceived, bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. He going to wait to lure you in a little bit. See, you think you're going to go out there and get some freedom from all this rules and regulations. No, he's going to let you hit the bottle and hit the dope and hit the ladies and hit all that until you get really in. Then you say, you know what, I want to get released from this. No, you can't get out now when it's finished. But I don't want to stay no more. And now you're addicted. I pity these guys. Man, the stuff we did, you didn't take it once and you were addicted for life. Sin happens. Deal with it, but don't get knocked out of the game and get discouraged. Sin will take you further than you want to go and keep you longer than you want to stay. Sin can happen fast. You think when he got up that day, he thought this would happen? The prudent man foreseeth the evil. We need to walk circumspectly. Like somebody wants to devour you. Like somebody wants to kill you. He wants to do more than kill you. I was at a men's conference. I think the first year I was saved, and probably wouldn't approve of whoever the artist of this song was, but I'll tell you what, it shook me to the core when this guy sang, "Feelings that should never have been awakened within, tearing the heart in two. Listen, I beg of you, guard your heart, guard your heart. Don't trade it for treasure. It's a high price to pay." We need to guard ourselves because sin can happen the day we walk out that door. Sin can happen. The lust of the heart can well up in one conversation, one passing glance. We need to walk circumspect. The cost of sin, because of time, we won't go to the passages. We've gone over them, but I'll just say this. In 2 Samuel 12, now we're going to be looking at the cost of David's sin. David's son dies. That was the judgment. See, the wages of sin is death. Unfortunately, often it's somebody else's death. See, if you decide you're going to go hit the bottle and get behind that wheel, you might kill somebody innocent. Wages to sin is death. Yeah, but it wasn't you that died. You deserved it, but that's just the way the thing is. In 2 Samuel 13, David's son Amnon rapes his sister. What did Amnon do? Same thing Dad did. Only a little bit further. Took what didn't belong to him with interest. Because that's how sin is. That's the law of sin. It's a Cammilleri. It's called spiritual second law of thermodynamics. It just gets worse and worse and worse. They sinned more than their fathers. It's the law of sowing and reaping. You reap, you sow one seed, you reap a whole stalk. Dad takes the neighbor, and I'm glad you elaborated that was, I hesitate to use the word consensual. Listen, you can say no even to the king. Now today with the Me Too movement, no, he was a man in power, and you understand, I'm careful about saying, yeah, she just went in there, go ahead. However, you don't have to say yes.
Amen.
Listen to me, to your pastor, to your father, to your brother, to the policeman that pulls you over, you do not have to say yes. Cry out to God. I hope that's not too personal. And I'll just throw this in. And if someone comes to you, pastor, or you, dad, that this has happened, you better take action. So I'll just say it this way if it's true that it was allowed. Dad takes the neighbor in consensual adultery, but with interest, the son takes the sister with rape and incest. That's the law of sin. You reap more than you sow. We're talking about collateral damage of sin that is taking place in his home. In my other passage, David's son Absalom rebels. Well, how did that stem from this? Was this a cost of his sin? Remember, the first sin of the son dying, he said, listen, David, you didn't die, but I got to take your son. Wages of sin is death. And this Amnon, he wanted what he wanted, and he wanted it now, just like David. What about Absalom, though? You know what's amazing? And here's the point I'll give you on this. David was loyal to authority. We've heard all kinds of messages on that. David did what the king told him, right, Brent? He did what the king told him no matter what, and then some. But Absalom was awful with authority. Absalom was a rebel against the authority. Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. You know what we learned from that? Don't expect your kids to pick up your good things, but expect them to pick up your bad things. The cost of sin. Sin has collateral damage, and unfortunately, many times it shows up in the family. Now, I don't believe in generational sins. If my father was an adulterer and a wife beater, I don't have to do that. Amen. If he was a drunk, I don't have to do that. It's not in my DNA. It's not in my genes. My environment, yes, did affect what's part of me, but Jesus breaks the chains that bind. And here's my thought for today that I'll leave you with. I got to roll. For the cost of sin in David's life, what we as parents use in moderation, the children will usually use in excess. It's just the way it is. It doesn't get better. It usually gets worse. Let me clarify to you young people, lest you think you're going to use that for an excuse. There's a verse in Jeremiah. And the Lord said, hey, don't use that parable that says, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. Yeah, that's right. I'll give you the Cammilleri version. You got cavities because your dad eats Skittles. No, you got cavities because you eat Skittles. Every man will be put to death for his own sin. Oh, yeah. Every man will be judged for his own sin. Timothy's father was a Greek. What are you going to say when you stand before God? Well, my dad had an anger issue. Well, maybe if you had you for a son, you'd have an anger issue too. My dad gave me the Italian 45, 4 this way and 5 this way, man. Really, all us guys, a lot of these men here, our fathers weren't saved. What's our excuse? Amen. So don't use that excuse and take advantage of what I'm saying here. But parents, I think David may have planted some seeds long before Bathsheba that hurt him a little bit. And what the parents use in moderation, the children usually use in excess. Let me explain something to you. I like the way you call that commitments. I'm going to draw you a box of our matters of faith and practice, okay? And in this box, we have, I'm going to use the word standards. You say, oh, not that word. Standards. They got them at Starbucks. They got them at Chick-fil-A. They got them at the Department of Weights and Measures. Standards. They don't make you holy. They keep you safe. And keep other people from stumbling. But here's what I want you to get. Here's my box of standards. Then I have my exceptions, where I step outside of that for certain, maybe justified reasons. All right? Expect my exceptions to be the children's standard. That's good. I'll give you an example. Let's say, and I'm not preaching on standards. You do what your husband, pastor, and God tells you to do. But Let's say I say, I do not watch TV. I have a conviction against it. But I have some exceptions. Home movies. Kirk Cameron fireproof movie. Jeopardy. Andy Griffith. And as seen on TV, infomercials. And I really don't have to worry about this one much. And if the Buffalo Bills were in the Super Bowl. Expect my exception to be my children's rule.
That's good.
My daughters, I got 8 daughters. Oldest is 30, youngest is 14, and we started way long ago. I went to preaching and heard some convicting things about women wearing pants and all that. And I got my wife real good. She's very humble. My wife's wonderful. We were high school sweethearts, married before we were saved, and so we grew up together. And I said, girls, guess what we're going to do? What, Dad? You guys are going to wear no pants. They're little kids. No pants for a whole month. Oh, boy! Hi, honey. 30 years. But let's say, I say, you know what, girls? We're not going to wear the pants. But if you got to run to the store, or if you play basketball on the Christian university team, and fine, I'm not saying do or don't. What I am saying is, expect my exception to be there. But it's called the second law of spiritual dynamics. It's called negative spiritual inertia. If you just stand still in a world that we live in a church that we live in, you're going to go backwards. If I drink only on the holidays, expect my kids to drink all the time. Maybe expect your grandchildren to go to hell. We don't talk about our preacher, but we talk about other preachers. Expect your kids to talk about your preacher. That's all I'm saying. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 17, 8 minutes. Deuteronomy 17. See, David's stuff was multiplied in his children. Deuteronomy 17, verse 15. God said, I'm going to give you a king. You want a king? I'm going to give you a king. Verse 16, but he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses. For as much as the Lord hath said unto you, ye shall henceforth return no more that way. Neither shall ye multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away. Neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold. We won't go there. I'm going to give you the passage just so you got it for the record. But in 1 Chronicles chapter 18, it looks to me like David might have multiplied some horses. And he's hawking some horses, but there's like 1,000 horsemen. He hawked some chariot horses, but he didn't hawk the horsemen horses. Anyways, go to 1 Kings chapter 4. That was the father. Let's look at the son. Verse 26, 1 Kings 4:26. And Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses. You know why? Because really, as a general rule, what the parents use in moderation, the children will use in excess. You say, preach, you trying to scare us? Absolutely. Our exception usually ends up their rule. Young parents, look past the nose on the end of your face to see what's coming in future generations. Man, when we were saved, we'd have a guy come in and he'd preach against the trolls. They're like these little dolls. Oh, if you got trolls, you're going to have demons in your house. Man, Barney. You guys, little kids know who Barney is? He's like a purple guy. Why are you pointing at her? She ain't Barney. Barney, this guy come in and preach against Barney. I'm telling you, God's my witness. I'm saved 8 months, man. Grandma, don't tell Grandma I got rid of the Barney towels. I'm not even sure I told my wife. Man, I got them Barney towels. I stuffed them in a bag. I'm on the way to Eastman Kodak looking around, no cameras back then. I stuffed them in the garbage. You know, Barney Rubble's got a demon on Fred Flintstone. Shut it off! These kids now, the video game keeps them quiet, and these kids are mesmerized, man. Think of what it's going to do to your children and your grandchildren before you make decisions. Because what we use in moderation, they usually use in excess. Not sure about the horse thing, but I am sure about the wife thing. David's first wife, Michal, we heard about her this week. You know that she was given to another man until David became king? She was with David, goes with another man. I think I got this right. David becomes king, and she's with him again. David's second wife, Abigail, the wife of Nabal the fool, that looks like God put him out of his misery, she's a widow of another man. Is that multiplying wives? Bathsheba, he ends up marrying her. He's on number 3. Every one of them have been with someone else. Don't turn there, 2 Samuel chapter 3. 7 of his wives are named. Is that multiplying wives? 2 Samuel chapter 5, it says he took more concubines and wives. Is that multiplying wives? Now we know the concubines, that 10 of them were up on the roof when all that stuff is, so we know he had at least 10 of those. I won't turn there for time because I only got a few minutes left. But you know what Solomon had. You know what that teaches us? The eyes of man are never satisfied. Dad has 7 plus. Son has 700 plus. Sin gets dad's flesh, but he kind of recovers. I'm hoping we're going to hear about that and the repentance and all that stuff. Sin got the son's heart, and he turned from God and was wicked. You know our God, adultery and murder is one thing. When you're after his heart, turning to them other gods, that's what trips his trigger housing. Just like Daddy. Adam ate, Cain killed. Lot mixed, but escaped. Sons-in-law and wife perished. Lot kind of got along with that stuff, but it says, you know, seeing and hearing, but his righteous soul was vexed. His daughter seemed to be okay with incest. Eli was an old man and heavy, and I'm not going to read into that text too much and assume that he was fat. He could have just been a large man, but he said he was heavy, and I'll tell you where his son's problem started, what they put in their mouths. And you're talking to a guy that loves to eat. I mean, we grew up eating, man. I don't want to go off on that, and you know what? I got 8 daughters. Almost every one struggles with that thing. Fortunately, I taught them how to exercise too. But I'm telling you, what we use in moderation, our children are using excess. And you think, well, it's just our exception. It will be their rule. I think David planted those seeds, and them boys looked, and man, our kids are just bent on being wicked sinners themselves, and the sooner they could find you're a hypocrite, the better they feel about being able to sin. Those boys started with, give me that flesh. I don't want it sodden. I don't want it boiled. I want it raw. I want it roasted. I want me a ribeye. It ended with them laying with the women at the temple. Daddy didn't do that. One more point. Here's God's judgment. Thus saith the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own house, and I will take thy wives before thine eyes, and give them unto thy neighbor, and he shall lie with thy wives in the sight of the sun, S-U-N. For thou didst it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel, before the sun. You know what Jesus said? He said, don't pray out there to be seen of men. He said, pray in the closet, so thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But I'm telling you, there's a principle that works on the other end of that spectrum. You may sin in secret, but be sure it'll find you out, and most of the time it comes out publicly. You plant the seed in the ground, nobody sees it, but boy, when that fruit comes up. David said unto Nathan, after he confessed, the Lord hath put away thy sin, thou shalt not die. Oh, howbeit, because you gave the enemies of the Lord opportunity to blaspheme, listen to these words, thy child also that is born of thee shall surely die. That's why I think one of the things David said, oh, Absalom, Absalom, my son, my son. He probably felt that guilt trip, man. I should have died. That's what that sin that he did called for. Maybe you think you're getting away with it. I hope I could scare you to think, but maybe the seeds are germinating in your children. Ladies, you're going to criticize your husband privately? Don't be surprised if your daughters criticize theirs publicly. What we use in moderation, our children usually use in excess. Our exceptions usually become their norm. Maybe you would take inventory of your exceptions. Maybe you would take inventory of what we are so foolish in light of this Bible that we have to think we are getting away with. Young parents, I'm going to ask you the question that I ask our young parents all the time. Because if your children drift from you and your standards and your commitments as far as you drifted from your parents, what will they look like? What will your church look like? He talked about modesty, so I'll take a little bit of liberty. When we started out, man, it was long and loose. The skirts were long and the necklines were high, and that's just, they used to think we were Amish. Now, they think because they got a skirt on that you can just sit. You might be better with a pair of pants. I'm not for it.
That's right.
But use your head, man. If someone can see the inside of your thighs, that's called a peak. You say, why are you saying that? That's where I'm at right now. And you walked in our church, you'd think, man, this is a very conservative church. But it's not better than it was 20 years ago. And I know us old people, ladies, I don't want to be like the frumpy mom. But when there's a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger gap between the older ladies that are walking with God and the younger ladies, you know what that is? It's just proof that it's not going to get better. What we use in moderation, our children are using excess. And man, did that cost David dearly. When you make your decisions about what you're going to do and how you're going to live and what you're going to change from what your parents used that got you through, that you're so critical of because Dad was so hard, you better look at those little babies and your grandchildren, because they may end up in hell if they drift as far as you did and then as far as your children did. Pastor?
Preaching that you've heard today could save your life. It really could save your life. When David was talking to Nathan, he gave him two things. He said, concerning that rich man, he said the rich man should die, and he said the rich man should restore fourfold. God said, in mercy, I'm not going to make you die. He ended up restoring fourfold. I think when Absalom died and David cried out, his thought was, would to God that he would have killed me instead of the restoration. You have no idea what you're getting into when you mess with sin.
You're right.
You have no idea. And when God gives you options and things and you think you know what to pick and you think you know how it's all going to turn out, when the end of that reaping comes, you're going to look back and you're going to say, it was not worth it. It was not. Pleasures of sin for a what? Season, that's all. But the consequences just keep rolling in. God help us. God help us. If you want to take this time to come pray, we're going to have one more preacher in just a moment. Brother Sam, are you a cappella? Oh, no, there she is. Okay. Why don't we sing a song together? If you need some time to pray, go ahead and do that now.
572.